All right, thank you everybody for taking the time on this Wednesday afternoon. As I mentioned, my name is Areya Dargahi, and today we're gonna talk about how to understand usage data. A little background on myself: I'm an account executive here at ChurnZero. However, I have a long history in customer success, about 3-4 years. This position is a little bit more, or this topic is a little bit more interesting to me, since in my current roles, I did not have access to usage, or at least something that was easily accessible. So this kind of speaks near and true to my heart, and how we can kind of impact customer success teams, and how they can really make a pretty big impact on their customers. So today, within the kind of the usage umbrella, I want to talk about 4 things. First, defining usage, what types of usage there are. How to interpret usage data to drive more proactive interactions. Why utilizing usage data is really key to reducing a customer's time to value in ways that we may not have thought of. And then lastly, how can we use usage data across different market segments and really drive try to influence product decisions. So first, on defining usage, this is fairly basic, but I think there's 2 main ways to define usage. First is going to be what I call kind of primary or standard usage. These are going to be very simply, what are the actions taken within directly within the application? What are our customers doing? So this might be things like login frequency, features used or things not used. Very straightforward. The second would be things that are a little bit kind of like secondary usage. So think of these as kind of product responses and outcomes, but they're not directly related to an action that a user takes directly inside of the app, like clicking a certain button or something like that. These are just as important, as they have a really huge impact in terms of how they're going to affect your customer and their satisfaction rates. So think of like Dropbox, as you hit your storage limits. If a customer was no longer able to upload a document, they'd be pretty peeved. Salesforce, if they're hitting some API limits or some upload errors, those are things that would really cause some frustration from a customer. And even like things like, for instance, a HubSpot, if they were continuously getting bounce backs, I mean, and they didn't know, or at least they didn't know how to fix it, this would be something that would lower the chances of actually hitting their goals, their desired outcomes, and ultimately would affect the renewal and them staying with us. So we want to take these both into consideration when we think about usage. So before we actually go on, I want to kind of get a sense of how prevalent usage is within the CS teams out there. So I have 2 quick polls. For the first one, tell me, curious how many people actually have access to usage data. So we'll just give a second for you guys to answer that. And out of those that have usage data, curious to get an understanding of how often you have access to it. Is that something that comes out weekly or less, monthly, or something that takes quarterly or over that? So let's take just a quick second and get some answers there. Fantastic. So let's talk about how we can drive proactive engagements using this usage data. So I have the privilege of, here as an account executive, I have the privilege of speaking with CS teams every single day. And when I ask what type of proactive engagements they're largely involved in, a very common thing that I hear is they set periodic meetings to review how things are going. And I think that's a great start. However, there's a lot of things that can happen within those meetings that we have to address when they happen. And waiting until the next meeting to have the conversation can potentially be really catastrophic. So there's two types of things that we really want to use to drive these proactive engagements. Things that are behavior based. So what are our customers doing inside of our app? We want to look at both positive behaviors, as we want to continue them to encourage, we want to encourage them to continue to do the things they're already doing, especially if it's kind of a value add or sticky feature inside of the app itself. And then we also want to look at it from a role perspective. How do expectations differ depending on the role of the user? An admin is likely going to be using the product very differently than an end user would. End users might be completely different across different departments and the value that they're getting from the application. So we really have to hone in on those two things to understand what's essentially going to drive our outreach. And we have to really, and we have to be pretty diligent about those, because again, customer success is the name of the game. With that said, when we typically speak with maybe one person or our point of contact, our user base is comprised of more people than that. We have to make sure that they're all being successful. Now, how can we drive this proactive outreach at scale is another topic. There's automation. There's a lot of different things that you could do. Today, we'll be more so focused on the one. So at a basic level, again, those are the two key reasons. And what we're looking at, and within those two areas, there's two types of usage that are going to really help drive the content of those interactions. So first, what we're looking at right now is what I like to call absolute usage. So here we're putting very explicit thresholds on behaviors that we want to see, and based on if we are hitting those marks or not, this is going to be what's going to drive the conversation. So these might be specific users that have not logged in within the last 14 days, or maybe this is customers who have or haven't used our really sticky feature that less than 5 times this week that we know somebody should be using every single day. Or maybe customers have not hit a certain milestone within our app within a 30-day window of going live, right? It's very explicit. There's very it's a very specific things that we are looking for to ultimately kind of create this trigger. Now, there's another type of usage that I like to use a little bit more, and it's trend usage. And it's essentially looking at the trends over time. So if you look at that little bubble over here to the right, it says that this customer has been using this feature, 273 times more than the previous time range. So we're setting goals, we're setting a time period, and we want to see fluctuations, or we want to help, at least we want to use those fluctuations as they go up and down to once again drive those engagements. And these are a lot more interesting to me. These tell a little bit more of a story, and it allows us to catch red flags before they become much larger problems than we can, much larger problems that we won't typically be able to get ourselves out of. So what's like an example of trend use, maybe a trend usage trigger? So maybe that is a power user of ours is using our app 20% less than in the last 14 days. It's rather uncommon that somebody who loves our app just starts using it less. Maybe that they're going elsewhere, or maybe they're on their way out. Maybe that's something that I want to definitely be proactive and figure that out. Or maybe an admin is adding new users 50% less within 180 days of the renewal window when they were continuously adding users, and we could see that they've been hiring. Maybe this is a sign that they're automatic, or maybe this is a sign that they are potentially looking at alternative solutions. And we have to be able to catch this, because kind of once we hit this bottom part of the graph here, it would be very, very difficult to dig ourselves out of that hole, and we want to catch it way ahead of time. So now let's flip to how we can use usage data to reduce our customers' time to value. And here I want to focus more notably on onboarding. So one of the things I noticed as an account executive here with the conversations that I have with our customers and our potential customers, when we talk about onboarding, speed is really the name of the game. Teams are looking to get their customers through this onboarding process as quickly as possible, and it's largely focused on what they need to do internally to get their customers onboarded and get them to go live. Well, some key questions that a lot of people don't even ask them, or a lot of teams don't ask themselves, are does my customer understand the value of the features that we even provide? Have I just talked about them, or have they understood them? Now, those are completely different things. Do they know how to properly perform the key functions in the app correctly? Understanding them is one thing, knowing how to use them is completely different. Can they mostly be self-sufficient within the next 30 days? Hey, I know we're going to put together these proactive triggers. We're going to reach out when we see kind of trends go up and down. But we don't want them to start rocky. It's just not a good experience. And that's really going to impact the duration of the term with you guys. So we really want to make sure they're ready to actually even go live. So here at ChurnZero, we are of the true belief that we want our customers to really hit certain milestones, usage milestones rather, through this onboarding process or throughout this customer journey. So when they go live, everything can go as smoothly as possible. So what we're looking at right here is a very simple onboarding process. We got the account configuration here up at the top. There's a training. There's a first email campaign milestone, and then they're ready to go live. Well, if we look at these achievements right under them, this is what we need our customer to do in that first milestone before we ever move to the next. And notice that it's a required thing. I'm not going to jump to training if they haven't even logged in the first time. It's going to be like speaking to a brick wall, right? So what we're doing here is we're really honing in on our customer actually doing certain things within the application that kind of helps guide the onboarding to the next step and so forth. Now, I will say that this may add some time to an onboarding, and that's a realistic thing to expect. But I will rather take an onboarding that took two weeks, a month longer than planned, and have them be successful at the onstart any day over having a customer start off rocky. And I'm now this CSM, but rather than help you be strategic, I'm just continuously helping with these incredibly tactical things that I should have really covered during onboarding. That was my job to make sure that you were successful, and I failed at that. So let's really focus, let's put an emphasis on usage during the onboarding process and not necessarily just trying to get them through as quickly as possible. Now, we put these kind of triggers and proactive engagement strategy involved, we'll be in a little bit better place. But again, having them to start out successful is obviously, I think, across the board, a better idea. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about how to use usage data to influence product decisions. So far, we've really been looking at individual customers. And I know that if I've ever gone to a product team, you've ever gone to a product team, and I've asked for a specific feature, well, it's likely not going to happen for a single customer. What we really need to do is we really need to show the importance at an aggregate level. And we need to not only show this within the usage data itself, but we need to pair this with our own conversations, right? So 3 main ways to get them to actually listen to you, or at least with some urgency. Segment up your customer base. We need to understand exactly who this is going to impact. We need to show the declining trends within that market segment. If features were working perfectly out the gate, all the trends should point upwards. If they don't for any reasons, and obviously downwards, this is a bigger problem, but we have to be able to show that against the market segment. And as I mentioned before, we have to tie these declining trends with our anecdotal conversations. And there's a few ways you could score that within your CS platform or your CRM or however you're doing that. So what you're looking at here is trends over time, but rather than looking at single customers, if you look here at this kind of like red box, I've actually segmented my customers from those that are my enterprise accounts, and then those are in the retail industry. And we could see, and looking, oh, by the way, we're looking at this over the course of the last 60 days. We can obviously see over time that there's some the trend is downward, right? And then if you look over here around 623, they're hardly doing anything in there. They're logging in, but their actually interactions and their actual activity inside the application itself has come to a halt. Had we found this, have we been able to fix this a little bit earlier? Right? Could have kept our customers happy, right? It would have maybe added some new tasks on the product team, but that's kind of the name of the game. But now we have really data to support why these enhancements should be made. So segmentation is key here, and then being able to identify those trends. And this is why getting this data to customer success teams is incredibly important. Maybe it's not something that the product team has kept their eye out on, but that you had a conversation yesterday and how impactful some of these enhancements could be. So guys, that was a short webinar on usage data. We did cover a few topics. I want to open it up for a few questions. While we wait for some of you guys to enter those, I do have two that I've asked a little bit earlier. I'll address those now. So Jenny asked me, what's the ideal upload or update frequency of usage data? Well, I would say that that's really largely dependent on the business. I'll give you an example. Here at ChurnZero, we're a tool that CSMs live and breathe out of, right? So we're looking at things at a daily level here because it's important. We know that because it's a very everyday tool like Salesforce, we have to keep an eye on it like that. If your product is something that warrants a monthly or quarterly view, that's fine. The biggest thing I would just say there is that it has to be consistent. You can't get it one quarter, not the next, 1 week, not the other. You have to make sure it's consistent and stay on top of it. And Ken also asked me, do customers ever react negatively knowing that you're keeping track of how they're using the application? I think this could be taken a few different ways. Ultimately, I think it's our job to reinforce that we are there to help them be successful and hit specific goals within the business, which is why they brought you guys on, which is why they may have bought your product in the first place. So I have them not necessarily look at it as big brother or big sister, but rather that you're going to help them be better at their job, with your expertise. I think that is going to be all of the questions that we have. Oh, never mind. There's a few more. Let me see. So Vivian asked, is it possible to have this material at our mailbox? I think Vivian means sending her the PowerPoint. If so, I will send this to you. If I did get that question wrong, I'll happily answer those private. Do you see more common product requests when usage is low or high? I showed an example of segmenting retail accounts. Typically, are there common segmentation that you use within typically, are there common segmentation methods you use to provide the most insightful usage data and trends? I'm sorry, the first question was from Alexander. I think that you're going to see a fair bit of product requests, whether trends are low or high. I think that you also have to be the expert here, and you have to pick up on those trends and proactively reach out to also understand what exactly their business looks like and is your product hitting the mark or not? This may not be a request that's going to come directly from the customer. Sometimes this may be a request that needs to come internally. Sarah also asks, typically, are there common segmentation methods that you use that provide the most insightful usage data and trends? Yeah, there are. So we here like to call, our segmentation engine here is pretty powerful here at ChurnZero, and I like to call it kind of micro segmentation. So micro segmentation, rather than looking at industries or size of accounts or anything, we can even get down to certain time periods. I think using segmentation using different type of segments in conjunction with each other, maybe during the onboarding period or maybe 30 or 60 days after go live is a lot more insightful. And I think this ties really well into, we know that we have to have a successful onboarding and go live for, and the chances of that the chances of a renewal with a successful go live are incredibly higher. So not only looking at size of company or industry or things like that, but also time frame is something that I think would be something incredibly useful for segmentation purposes. Awesome. Well, guys, this was fantastic. I really enjoyed spending time with everyone today. We will send this out to everyone, and if anyone has any questions and wants to contact me directly around any of this stuff, and admittedly I kept it a little bit more basic today, please reach out. Happy to answer anything that I can. Thank you everyone for your time. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.